Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Hopefully you can see that.
all good. So if you just
Excellent.
wanted to introduce yourself and go, you're good to go.
Lovely. Okay, so my name's Kia Richardson. I'm a support worker at Hampshire SENDIASS. Yeah, I'll be talking about annual reviews today. You can either stick a question in chat, like Sarah said, or feel free to interrupt me because I'm not a fan of just hearing my voice endlessly droning on, but whatever works for you. So just an introduction of what we'll be covering today. So what is an annual review? The different types of reviews and when they would be held, how the review itself is structured, the timescales surrounding reviews, because they're not, they are statutory timescales, they should be followed. What parents, carers and young people can contribute to the review, what the meeting looks like, and what happens after the meeting, and then the duties on the local authority following that. We're also going to be looking at annual reviews at transition points, so between phases of education, preparation for adulthood, and yeah, how we can help, how Hampshire SENDIASS can help. And I've got some links to the guidance that I refer to throughout, just at the end for you. Okay, so what is an annual review? So where a child or a young person has an annual review, it must be reviewed at least once a year by the local authority. The annual review is the statutory process of looking at the needs and provisions specified in an EHCP and deciding whether these need to change. The review must focus on the child or young person's progress towards achieving the outcomes specified in the EHC plan and whether these remain appropriate. Okay, so interim or early reviews. So as I said previously, it's at least 12 months. If there's a good reason, it can be called earlier. Reasons that it might be called earlier would include if it's the recommendation from a previous annual review. So it could be, we're going to put this provision in place for, say, 6 months, and then we're going to see if it's making the change that we want to see, for example. It could be that the school has identified that the pupil is at serious risk of exclusion. So, needs might be changing quickly, different provision needs to be put in place. Having an early annual review is a way of getting that provision changed so that needs can be met. So if the child or young person's needs have changed and the placement is at risk of breaking down, so if the school or the education setting is saying, we cannot meet need, there isn't sufficient support in place, again, this is the way to change the support that the young person is receiving. Or if the young person has needs that are known to change rapidly, so because of their needs, it could be that, everything seems to be going smoothly, but 2 or 3 months later, it could be a completely different picture. In cases like that, it might be that they are held more regularly than every 12 months. So the structure of the review. Right, so at least 2 weeks before the start of term, the local authority provides educational settings, CCGs, and social care workers with a list of children or young people who will require a review of their EHC plan that term. So it is the local authority who's responsible for this review, and they will be notifying the people who need to carry it out. The review itself is sort of split into 4 parts. The first bit is collecting and sharing information, and that's from everyone involved with the child or young person. The second part, which is the meeting itself, the review. Then we have the head teacher or the school's report of the annual review meeting. And then, all being well, 2 weeks after that is sent out, the local authority will send out their decision about what's going to happen to the plan following their review of the annual review paperwork. Okay, so there are time limits for the completion of the annual review process. The first review will be 12 months from the date the EHCP was issued. Any subsequent reviews will be within 12 months from any previous review. And reviews held after EHCPs are amended will be within 12 months of the original EHC plan or the previous review, not from the date of the amended EHCP. So it is very, it's fiddly saying it like that, but it is clear in law when these reviews need to take place. And for children aged up to 5, so any sort of children in early years settings or in year R, you know, the code of practice does suggest that they are reviewed every 3 to 6 months, and that's because children at that age, their needs would be changing more rapidly, and it might be that different provision is required. So who must be invited? I've got a whole list of people there, and it's basically everybody who is directly involved with the child or young person and their plan. So the parents and the carers, the child or young person, and I mean, that can, it doesn't have to be that the child or young person attends for the whole meeting if they're not able to for their needs, or because it's not very nice sometimes to have to sit and have to listen to a meeting about the things that you may struggle with. I mean, for example, I had my 10-year-old's annual review last week, and she came for the first 10 minutes and then disappeared, but it was nice to have her there just for a bit, I think. So the educational setting representative, so it might be the head, it might be the SENCO. The local authority SEN officer will be invited, but they do not have to attend because it's something that's delegated to schools. There might be occasions where they do attend, but if they're not there, it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong, it's just they don't attend all of them. If the child or young person is involved with health or with social care, it might be helpful to have somebody from either of those services attending to give an update on progress. But again, if it's not relevant to your child or young person, you wouldn't expect them there. And anyone else who's involved with your child or young person that would be helpful to attend the meeting. So I've put some examples there of youth offending teams, therapists, job coaches, specialist teacher advisory service, anyone like that. And it might be that they don't attend the meeting, they might provide something that, you know, that could be provided in advance for everyone to read, for example.
Can I ask a quick question there, Kia?
Yes.
Can parents request someone attend those meetings?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So it's like I don't know, somebody independent that they, you know, has a specialist field, but is invited by the parents rather than by the local authority or by the school.
Who is involved with the child, or just to give general advice?
Yes.
Which one?
I'm just thinking it's one of the things that I get asked quite a lot is, well, could I bring somebody with me who's a autism specialist, or could I bring, or even just a friend to listen in sometimes as well, because they're quite full on those sessions sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah. I think bringing a friend is a good idea, because it is full on, it is overwhelming sometimes, and it's hard to take it in when it's about your child, I think. For a professional, I think it would have to be someone who's directly involved with the child.
Okay, having raised that, I've got something like, for example, somebody said to me, if you're paying for your child to have a private OT or a private speech and language therapy, could you invite, as a parent, invite those people along, and would they be allowed to attend?
I think if they're providing support to your child, yes, but I would also wonder why that isn't being provided as part of the EHC plan.
Well, perhaps that's why they're there, to help.
Yeah. So I think in that case, I think if it's to provide sort of generalized advice around something, I don't think that would be helpful. I think it would have to be specific to that individual. Yeah. Okay. Now my presentation's died.
So I've got another one now. See, I've started something. What about an autism support worker? I think that would go into the same category, wouldn't it?
I think so, yeah, because it would be about that child's specific needs. So if there is something that has been identified that they require, it would then be in a specific report, I would imagine.
My personal situation is my daughter has Down syndrome, and we have an outreach worker who works with young people with Down syndrome, and she occasionally goes into reviews because she has specific knowledge that she can share.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one. I don't think there's anything in law to say they absolutely couldn't attend. It's I guess if they're supporting the school to make provision, but I would hope that I know it doesn't happen in practice all the time, but I would hope that the plan provided for that.
And I think I think you need to tell the school first, obviously. Don't just rock up with someone.
Definitely. Yeah, and that sort of feeds into what I was going to go on to say, actually, is getting information in advance of the meeting so that everyone's on the same page about what's going to be discussed. So it should be 2 weeks before the meeting itself. The head teacher or the SENCO will request and collate contributions from parents, child or young person, their child's teachers, and others invited to the review meeting, which goes back to that anyone who's involved with the child sort of category. And that's so everyone gets, it is supposed to be at least 2 weeks before the meeting. Everyone can read what's going to be discussed, what everyone's viewpoints is, so nobody gets blindsided. There's no sort of new information that suddenly appears at the meeting. You should all know about it in advance, so there's no surprises. So when you're writing your parents' contributions, I think it's important to remember Section 19 principles, which are the views, wishes and feelings of the child and young person and the parents' carers. They are so important, and the fact that they're participating is really important. Being provided with the information and support to enable their participation. So that maybe goes back to the child or young person's needs to make sure that it's done appropriately. I mean, my son, when he's very young and non-verbal, but his school did PECs and things to help get his views across about what he liked, what he didn't like, and that you can find creative ways of involving the person who it's all about, and support to help the child or young person achieve the best possible educational and other outcomes, preparing them effectively for adulthood. So what do you include? So it can be in any format, because the school might send you a form saying, this is what we'd like you to answer. It could be that you want to talk about something totally different. So you can include that, like I said, it can be what's, presented in a way that's meaningful for you or for the young person, depending on their needs. I would definitely suggest you include any new reports. It's all evidence-based. So anything that you want to sort of rely on to inform the plan, submit it then. And just think about what's working, what's not working. And also always trying to sort of anticipate the next step, thinking ahead. So future aspirations for your child or young person. The annual review is also the time where you can request a personal budget if that's something you want to do. And if you're considering a change of placement, or if you've called an early annual review to change placement, for example, what is that placement and why? Really, really helpful to have that in advance. So the meeting itself, it will be the head teacher or the SENCO who usually chairs the meeting. And it will be around all the information that's been submitted in advance. So the pupils' views, the parents' views, the pupils' overall progress in the last year, also their progress towards meeting the overall outcomes set out in the EHCP. So other things that could be discussed as part of the meeting that are important: the successes that the pupil has achieved in meeting short-term targets, as well as the EHC plan outcomes, their attainment levels and standard test results, and also thinking about changes in their personal circumstances, their special needs, or if any sort of new or different equipment, aids or access are required. So after the meeting, there will be, there will be some recommendations that will be recorded by the school or the education setting, and there should always be reasons for that. It shouldn't just be sort of closed, this is what's recommended. There should always be a because. Okay, and if there are any differing opinions on this, that should be recorded. So it should be school say X, Y, and Z, parents say A, B, C, because it's not for the school to make a decision on what will happen with the plan. That will be the local authority. So after the annual review meeting, I mean, personally, I always thought that the meeting was the annual review and that was it. And once the meeting was done, it was done. And it's not the case. So I think that's really important to realise, because I definitely didn't for a long time. The educational setting will prepare a written report of the meeting and send it to the local authority, and they should do that within 2 weeks. All invitees will receive a copy, so that includes the parents. So if you haven't got that within 2 weeks, it's definitely worth ringing the school and saying, so how about that paperwork then, because you should have received it. You can check it before it's sent to the local authority, and if there's something that you don't agree on it, it might be that the school has sort of not recorded it as it happened, and they might say, oh, sorry, yes, you're right, let's change that. Or it might be that it's differing opinions, in which case they might not want to change it. But as I said, they can still record that there is a difference of opinion about the outcome of this meeting. So make sure that what you want to get across has been recorded accurately before it's sent to the local authority. So then the local authority will review the plan, using all the information from the meeting, and they will make a decision about what to do with it. So they will either maintain it, which means just keep it going as it is, no changes. They will amend it, which means they will make changes to it based on what came up at the meeting, new assessments, all of that sort of thing. They might decide to cease to maintain it, so that means to stop it, so there won't be an EHC plan in effect any longer. Or they might decide that actually a full reassessment of need is required. So decision letter. So this is the bit that ends the review. This will conclude the annual review process. It's a legal letter. There's very specific things that it has to include, and it's very important. It's really important, I think, that you make sure that you receive this, because it's not uncommon that you might not receive it for one reason or another. So what they have to put in it is the local authority has to write to the parents, the young person and the school with their decision and the reasons for it within 4 weeks of the meeting. If the parents or the young person disagrees with this decision, they can then appeal that to the SEND tribunal service. So it won't ever be the end, full stop, this is the decision, like it or lump it. There is still the right of appeal. So thinking about transferring between phases of education with annual reviews.
I jump in just 1 second before we, because I've just had a question pop in about timescales. So if we pop in there, I've had a question 4 weeks after the meeting or 4 weeks after receiving the paperwork. So that's good. I think that's about you know how you're supposed to get that notice letter,
Mm.
and it's supposed to be 4 weeks after the date of the meeting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But but I see where the person is coming from, because what you said was the school has to send the paperwork within 2 weeks. So actually you're expecting that letter potentially 2 weeks after you've seen the paperwork. Is that
exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's how it
So
should be done.
It's statutory 4 weeks that you get that letter after. That's statutory, folks. I've never got mine in that time scale.
Yeah, no, that's it, exactly. So I think because it's up to 2 weeks that
Hope that answers the question, Sally.
That the school can send the paperwork. So they might send it the next day. They might do it along with the meeting and send it. You know, that could happen.
Okay.
But they have up to 2 weeks to do it. The local authority then has, if they take the 2 weeks, 2 weeks again. So yeah. So yeah, transferring between phases of education. So phase transfer, which I'm sure some of you might be in the process of doing if your child's moving up to a different school. So there are different dates by when the annual review has to be carried out. So I've tried to group them together. So that first group, early years to school, infants to juniors, juniors to secondary, and primary to secondary. All of the review and amendments must be completed by the 15th of February. And the reason for that is so that if you didn't agree with what was decided, you would then have time for a tribunal appeal, which is about 5 months to go through that process. So the idea is 15th of February, that then gives you time before September starts again. And from school to post-16, post-16 to post-16, it's 31st of March, just because you have a bit more leeway there.
So just to clarify again, Claire, by those dates, you should have that letter that says the decision.
Yeah.
And
and the placement then named on the plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's when it should be done. Yeah. So I think if you have a child that you're moving between phases of education, it's definitely something to think about. And a lot of the time it would be the case that an early annual review or an interim annual review, however the setting calls it, that should really be being held this term, in order that all the that timeline that we just discussed can be completed by the 15th of February. So if you are in that position and school haven't mentioned it, I would definitely raise it. Yeah, preparing for adulthood, and what does that mean? So it's really important that this is included as part of the annual review when it's relevant for the child or for the young person. It's always sort of thinking ahead, anticipating the next steps in education. So thinking about preparing for adulthood and better life outcomes. So things to consider would be good health, employment, independent living and housing, friends, relationships, and community. So we would always suggest starting early, having high aspirations for your child or young person, and using appropriate language that they can understand, because they need to be at the heart of all of this. So we would, I'm pretty sure it's in the guidance that all reviews taking place from year 9 at the latest and onwards must include a focus on preparing for adulthood, just so that it doesn't come as this sudden shock of, suddenly you're 16 and this is all going to happen. It's all, the groundwork is laid for it. And this might include, depending on the person's plan, effective planning for young people moving from children's to adult care and health services. It must seek and record the views, wishes, and feelings of the child or young person. So what are they good at? What are their interests? What do they see for their future? What do they want? It's there. I think this is sort of the point at which the young person needs to start to drive, if they're able, obviously within their own capabilities, what they want and how they want things to look. So it's more of a focus on considering options and choices for the next phase of education as well. So support from Hampshire SENDIASS. So we can provide support to parents and young people with annual reviews in the following ways. We can help explain the process and the possible outcomes and what they mean. We can help with preparing the parental contribution to the annual review. Sometimes you just think, I don't know what to say. So, you know, another pair of eyes can help. We can help prepare for the review meeting. Like you said, Sarah, it can be really overwhelming, and it helps to, you know, talk it all through in advance. We can attend the annual review meeting if needed. We can support with going through the report afterwards to make sure that everyone understands what's being written, what the school is saying, what happened at the meeting, basically. And if needed, if it does go to an appeal, that's something that we can support with as well. So there's a summary of the timeline. I won't bore you by going through it over again, but I think it helps. It helps to see it. You know, it is very clear how things should be done. It's very, very clearly laid out, and it might be the case that you need to ask questions about whether things are being done, but it's not like this would be nice if it's done. It is supposed to happen in this order at these times. So I think that can be quite
that
empowering.
answers something I've written down here. So I was looking right at the end, because we know that 4 weeks from the meeting date we should have a notice that says whether we're amending, ceasing, etc. And I think that last point says that 8 weeks from the amendment notice you should get the final amended plan. Yeah. So it should be 12 weeks from the annual review meeting to getting any amendments in place. Yes. The 4 weeks and the 8. Okay.
Maximum.
Maximum. It always strikes me though, it's huge chunks of a year, isn't it? I mean, that's exactly. That's a third of a year. That's you know, a huge amount of an academic year.
Yeah.
Gone.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Oh,
I've got a question. It's not really a question, but it's an interesting one, slightly harking back. My son is in year 6, and we've been told we'll be discussing preparing for adulthood at the review next month. But at 10 years old, it seems a bit too far ahead, not quite sure what we look at. I suppose that's probably because in year 6, we're also talking about what settings we're looking at. But I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, it does sound a bit early. I wonder what they've got in mind. It's about sort of trying to second guess what they're thinking. I don't know. It might be something like you know, depending on the child's needs, thinking about sex education and things like that.
Yeah, because that comes up in year 6, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So actually, that is something that tends to come up at the end of year 6. So it could be about things like friendships. Yeah, couldn't it, that you could be talking about, and how you maintain friendships. It could be sex ed is a good one, which we now call, I can't remember which way around.
Something else.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it's RSE. We put the relationships before the sex now, which you know seems sensible.
Makes sense.
But you know, you might want to look at something different with your child to what the mainstream class is doing, perhaps. Maybe go back and ask them the question. What do you want us to think about in terms of preparing for adulthood? I know it sounds a long way away, but having just transitioned to secondary with my daughter, and I'm going, oh my goodness, it's only 5 years of school before this all kicks off, and it comes around quick.
Yeah, especially as you were saying, with all the timescales, suddenly chunks of the year have gone, and yeah. Okay. Right, so yeah, just to summarize what I've been talking about really is that it's a legal process that the local authority has to follow. It's not something that it's nice if they do it. It has to be done. It's a mechanism for you to get changes made to your child's plan. So if you're thinking, oh my goodness, they need a change of setting, you can have all the conversations with the school and the local authority that you like, but this is how change happens in that plan. It's by having an annual review. I also think it's really important to remember it's evidence-based. So if your child needs a specific type of provision for their needs, you need to be able to demonstrate this, because it's similar to the assessment process. You know, whenever your child was first assessed for a plan, everything within the plan has to refer back to an assessment or a report, and it's the same with the annual review. Also, remember, if you don't agree with it, there's always a right of appeal. You know, it's never just going to be that's it, full stop, end of it. You will always be able to have a say if you disagree with the local authority's decision. SENDIASS are more than happy to talk about any part of annual review at all. You know, we do a lot of our work is about annual reviews, so we're more than happy to help with any stage of it. Also recommend IPSI for information, or, you know, disability specific organisations like Sarah talked about earlier about autism specialists. You know, anything like that would be a good idea. And then there's just some links to the statutory guidance. So there's the Act, the regulations, and then the guidance is the code of practice at the end.
What I might ask you to do with those in a second, Keir, is actually just copy and paste them into the chat, because then people can click them, because I can't, because it's not my
of course.
side.
No, I'll
but
do
then
that.
It means that people can just click them from the chat and open them and have them if they want to, rather than trying to copy the wretched thing. And
no, that's doing it.
Whilst you're doing that, I've been asked a question and I've answered it, and I want to check I've said the right thing. When do children with EHCPs get their secondary places confirmed? From my experience, the answer is when that school is named on your EHCP.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be before all their friends have had their school place named. It should be, but it doesn't mean that it is.
Before, really.
It should be way before.
It's March, April, isn't it, for standard
so
admissions?
in my experience, we knew my daughter had her place before her friends knew. However, I was dealing with lots of families last year who didn't know when other places have been allocated. Obviously, that's the reason, Keir, you've talked about trying to get these EHCPs in early, because once schools have allocated out their places, it just makes everything so much more complex.
Absolutely, because they will be allocated places before standard admissions. It's a separate process, but yeah, absolutely, you should either hear after your annual review this term, or you might have to wait until the 15th of February. It really shouldn't be beyond that. But Sarah, you rightly say the reality is sometimes different. So
my experience was that we had our annual review for secondary transition in the autumn term last year, and that what took the time was getting schools to say yes, and therefore that then making it onto the EHCP as the named school so that we could all move forwards. But it just took a bit of time. I feel like my school LEA, hang on a minute, I feel like my school or LEA are trying to pull a fast one. I'm being told contradictory info. Tell me what the contradictory info is, Sally, and we can tell you what the statutory guidance is, and then hopefully we'll be able to help you out. My son is living in Hampshire, but we would like him to go to West Berkshire mainstream school as we feel provision is better. How can we support our argument to get him there? All of his friends will go there. It's partly your argument right there for you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's stuff in the plan about peer groups, friendships, all of that sort of thing, that's really, really relevant. You know, it's very, very clear that the local authority has to name the parental preference apart from 3 reasons, which is inefficient use of resources, detrimental to the education of others, and what is the other one?
Come up with the 2 I'd know.
What is it?
Well, you're thinking about that
the
one.
Wrong type of school.
So my experience, there's an awful lot of where I live in northeast Hampshire, we get a lot of border crossing because of where we live, and there's a lot of young people here who live in Hampshire but go to a school in Surrey. And what tends to happen is people tend to be asked why they can't go to a Surrey school. So what you want to do is go to your Surrey school or Hampshire school that would be your allocated school, and you need to be able to demonstrate why that school isn't a better fit, and that works. But it's not unusual, and it happens a huge amount, particularly when people live on border areas, as you clearly do. So it's about both demonstrating that the school that you want is the right fit, and that perhaps there's a reason why the other schools aren't the right fit. Hang on a minute, let me just Right, Sally wants to explain her situation to us. Sally, you're very welcome to unmute and explain, so long as you accept that you're going to end up on the recording.
Do you want me to, shall I stop sharing? That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's fine. I'll try to be brief. Our EHCP was only granted in May of this year. We've since then had a brand new Senko. She, who's come from a different area, so doesn't know Hampshire's whatever policies. She has said that she's checked with Hampshire, and instead of doing a full annual review now, we can just submit a name change, so we can name our preferred secondary placement, and they'll just change that on the plan now, and that'll all be fine. And the Senko's saying that we should leave the annual review till May, which will have been a full year, but that obviously doesn't leave me any time then. I'm a bit confused.
I mean, my situation was very similar. I'll give you my on the ground situation, and then Kia can tell you my situation was very, very similar. My daughter's annual review took place in the summer term of her 5th year. And then we did another one in the autumn term of her year 6 in order to redo it and make sure that we had an EHCP fit for secondary, because you are going to need to change us. Maybe yours is more current, I suppose, but we did need to change stuff in my EHCP to fit my daughter going to secondary. So that may be the case, but I think you could legitimately have another whole annual review.
Yeah, I mean, I would second what you said, Sarah. I mean, I'm in a similar position with, I've just had my daughter's year 6 annual review, and her previous one was done in April. But it's different in your position, Sally, I guess, because all the evidence is all up to date. I would still probably suggest that you have an annual review, just so that you can check everything is actually okay. Because it's only just been in place, and you're sort of, if they're thinking, oh, we're just going to go ahead with this for secondary, you know, is it working? Is there anything you need to change for secondary? Will she be going to her, or he, I can't remember if you said it was a girl. Will they be going to their catchment school, or is there a particular setting you want them to be going to? If that's the case, there might be something that you would like to get across in that meeting to the school.
I suppose, if I'm thinking about it, the advantage of what the Senko is proposing, if it's doable, is that you then get a chance to have everybody around the table in the summer term before they go to secondary, which, you know, it might be quite nice. I mean, you would hope that you would have some kind of transition meeting at that point. I'm trying to rack my brain to think if we did.
I do worry if it's not being done as sort of a formal annual review, whether you would have the right of appeal as well. I don't know how they would be doing that.
Whilst we've mentioned that one, Sally, we'll move slightly on, because I think hopefully we've given you the statutory answer, which is basically probably I would best to go for a full annual review if you can, but
it wouldn't have to be long. It wouldn't have to be a long-winded exercise if everyone was happy, but I think just to sort of cover all bases, I would.
Sally's just said that she wants resource provision, not catchment. That doesn't matter, Sally. The EHCP process enables you to state any school as your preferred school.
Absolutely.
I think by definition of having an EHCP, lots of children are going to be looking at schools potentially other than their catchment school. And that gives you an opportunity. And in fact, certainly at the review that we named my daughter's school, the Senko from that school was invited and was part of that process. I don't know how usual that is. I was going to go on to say, Kia, you mentioned the right of appeal following annual reviews, which is something I must admit I'm not clear on. So explain.
When you get your decision letter from the local authority, it should give you your right of appeal. Okay. If it doesn't say it on there, ring them up and ask them for another letter that says it, because you can appeal any decision. It can be they say they want to maintain it and you don't agree. You can appeal that.
So, and that's the same as the process when you appeal an EHCP in the first instance, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
With the whole having to go to mediation first before and all of that.
Having to consider mediation.
One, consider it. You must consider it. You must have a certificate to say you considered it.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, okay, something I don't think we covered, and I don't know if it's relevant to anyone on the call today, but certainly it's something I have brought up in a lot of my sessions. What about young people who are in a setting other than school and annual reviews? How does that work?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Sorry.
Oh. I mean, they would still go ahead as they do, and the parent carers would attend. You know, it would still
Who's
be.
responsible for organising them, particularly if they're in a home setting?
It would be the school would, you know, the school would have to. They are delegated by the local authority to organise it, and it would be exactly the same as I've laid out, I would have thought.
So what if it's a child who's having tutors at home, Keir? So they
Oh, I
aren't,
see. Oh, I
see
beg
what
your
I mean?
pardon.
There's-
Yeah, I do.
See what I mean?
The local authority has got officers who have responsibility for EOTUS,
Okay.
and the local authority should be facilitating that. Whether that happens at home, I would imagine it wouldn't happen at home, but it might be somewhere neutral, like a
I know
library.
it's something that comes up on some of the sessions I do, because it's a little bit of an unusual one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because who the local authority is clearly responsible for the education, as they are for all children, but it's usually delegated to a school, and in a scenario where there isn't a middleman to delegate
in
to.
that case, it's absolutely the local authority.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, they have said that they have officers who are responsible for EOTUS, who have who oversee all of that, and they should be organising the annual reviews. The same statutory timescales, it all applies. None of that is different. It's just not delivered in a school. That's the only difference.
flicking through my these are good, folks. If no one else has got one of these, I've got a massive copy here of the code of practice, which is very useful. It's much easier than reading the document online, and I've just flipped through. There is a section, reviews where children and young people do not attend a school or institution, so it is all covered in there. That document's available online, everybody. That's Special Educational Needs Code of Practice. You can buy them printed out off eBay. Very useful. They're nice and heavy, and mine's covered in post-it notes, and I'm sure Kia's got one as well.
Yeah, I do.
Right. My son is 17, 18 in January, and his EHCP still refers to school. He is supported by MSA. I don't know what that means, Emma. Who say I need to update it, but where
Is
do
that
I
mind
start? Help, please.
sensibility, maybe?
Say it again.
Mind sensibility, maybe? I don't
Emma,
know.
tell us what MSA is. Ah, yes, whatever you said is right, Kim.
Okay.
Mind sensibility, yes.
So the question was amending the plan.
So let me just read it to you again. Now my son is 17, and his EHCP still refers to school. He is being supported by MSA, who say I need to update it, but where do I start?
So that would be at an annual review, just saying to the local authority, I would like this to be updated, and you know, as simple as that. They should be doing it. They should send you out an amended plan.
Is he actually not in school anymore, Emma? Is that the point, that he's not in school, and it's referring to a setting which he isn't even current anymore? Because obviously that would be an issue. And that's a good point, though, in terms of how does a parent here ask for an interim or an emergency assessment? Before we answer that, yes, the situation is he isn't actually at school anymore. So we have an EHCP that refers to a school which isn't where he is, and hasn't actually been in school since year 9.
So it sounds to me like the plan needs to be amended quite substantially. I would imagine there's a whole ream of evidence from Mind Sensibility about what the needs are, what the provision currently is, and it would be for the local authority to make those amendments. But you know, it's absolutely, you should be able to request that through an annual review, and it could be updated, you know.
So it might help us then to talk about how, if the annual review isn't happening, how do we request it? How do we ask for one as an emergency or an interim or whatever?
But I think it says in the guidance something like, if there's a good reason, it can't just be like, I fancy another annual review, let's have one. There's a reason. Not that anyone would be doing that, but yeah, it has to be with reason. So you'd ask the school in the first instance and say, I'd like an early annual review because you know, I don't know, they're not able to attend full time at the moment because of their needs, the provision isn't in place, what can we do about this? If schools say we don't feel that's a problem for whatever reason, if that happened to be the case, I would then suggest you to speak to SEN directly and say, I have requested an annual review, school are not putting it in place.
So in Emma's situation, I don't know what mind sensibility is. Is it a setting or is it provision?
I think it can be either.
So who would Emma need to ask in that SEN? Okay, so and it's
if mind sensibility are not, it depends if it's part of like a package, they might just be one provider. It depends, or it could be the case that they provide all of the provision in the plan. It depends, but you know, if you're not getting anywhere by speaking to them, I would go to SEN because ultimately they are responsible for that plan.
And if you're stuck, call SENDIASS.
Yes.
who will help you and help you walk through that process, because I think Definitely. It is a minefield. I think it's an absolute minefield sometimes of who you contact and how you contact and all sorts of other bits and pieces.
Yeah, I think especially if you're being told by the setting, no, this is how it's done, whether that's the truth or accurate or not, it can be different, and it's hard to challenge that sometimes.
Definitely, and I think so I've just got an extra bit of info come in. I didn't make it clear. We've had an annual review, but on the existing EHCP, which is out of date. So in which case, Emma, that's your opportunity. If you're having the annual review on that existing EHCP, that is your opportunity to get it amended.
Yeah, if the local authority have said, yeah, we've considered everything you want to amend, and we're not going to do it, we're just going to maintain it, you could then appeal.
Super, good. Okie dokie, let me just check that I've covered. Somebody's asked is support from SENDIASS free? Yes, absolutely. SENDIASS is a charity. I will, or Kia might be able to put the number in the chat.
I was meant to put links in, wasn't I? Let me do that.
I'll chat you.
Okay.
Yeah, so SENDIASS is done by county. So if you're a Hampshire parent, you phone Hampshire SENDIASS. That's even the case if you're wanting to look at a school outside of Hampshire. If you live in Hampshire, your education support is provided by Hampshire. So Hampshire SENDIASS services is totally free. They have a triage service, so if you ring, you go through to triage, and if they can't deal with you, you get allocated a caseworker. And yes, they can provide, as Kia said, all sorts of different support. And I know from my get-togethers that people really, really value the support that they've had from them. Right, let me just copy. I'm just going to copy you over so people can click on them if you want. The links that Kia has given me. Hopefully this is going to work. Which one did I get to? Haven't I just sent it back to you, have I, Kia? Yes, I have. Brilliant. Let me just see if I can do that. I'll tell you what I'll do. Rather than, I might not put, what I'll do is I'll make sure all of these go up on the when we share the recording online. So those of you that are watching, we have various different social media channels for HPCN. We use YouTube to put up these recordings, and they then get shared via our Facebook pages, both our main Facebook's page, our HPCN Facebook page, and individual ones that we have for different areas. So mine is Heart and Rushmore Share Together. What I'll make sure we do is when we share that video, that we include those links on them so people can find them. Okie dokie, and let me just flick and check we've covered a huge amount of ground today. Thank you very much, Kia. I know the one thing that we haven't covered, and I'm slightly nervous to ask about now, because I know what a big thing it is the hub.
Yes. Okay. Okay,
sorry.
So no. Okay, so you all know the hub, hopefully by now.
See, I don't.
Because it was previously.
I've had all these years, and I've still have no involvement with the hub at all. So
yeah. Well, I think they will be changing over existing plans into the hub. I don't think they're there yet. And I think the expectation is that annual reviews will be carried out through the hub. But my understanding is that that's not actually going to replace anything that I've talked about.
No.
It's still going to be that, you know, your contributions are asked for, the school will distribute all the information prior to the meeting. The meeting will be held either in real life or on Zoom, you know, whatever is normally happening for your school. And the information, so the report from the review will then be uploaded onto the hub, so you can view it there. And then the local authority will see it there and they will do their review and make a decision, and their decision will be on the hub. So everything will be carried out exactly the same. It will just be available to you via the hub.
The one thing I've had parents ask when we've had Hampshire in meetings is about having things in paper, because theoretically everything goes electronic. And I know a lot of people might potentially be working off phones trying to read 30-page documents.
Yes,
you are perfectly entitled to ask for all of those documents to be printed out and sent to you. So don't be afraid to do that, because the amount of paperwork at annual reviews is quite significant sometimes.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But I think, as Kia says, it will all start being done via the hub. My understanding is that it will be going on, people will be going onto the hub at transition. I just missed that, because but then it will be done, I think, within 3 years. The plan is to get everybody onto the hub. So that's a work in progress.
Yeah. But in terms of everything I've described, that should all be happening.
No, all the statutory deadlines and everything, nothing changes. Yeah. Right. Super. We've got some nice positive feedback from today, Kia. Thank you. We've covered loads of ground. I do hope it's been useful to those of you that are here. We will put this session up on YouTube. One session I wanted to mention, just that's coming up, just because of other ground we've touched, is that the Meet the SEND session for next month, which is, did I write down the date? No, I didn't. I'll find it in a second for you. It's all about 16 plus. It's going to be based on 16 plus social stuff first, and then we will at some point do a 16 plus education one, because there is so much out there, and that's why we start looking at the transition to adulthood from at least year 9, age 10, maybe a little bit early, but there's so much to deal with. And certainly for those of you that perhaps like me have medical practitioners involved as well, you move from being in children's services into adult services. So there is a huge amount to look at. So that is our next Meet the SEND session. We'll be looking at the social side of 16 plus, and that is on November the 19th at 1 o'clock. All those are posted. If you go on our HPCN website, there is a what's on page with calendar on there, and all the links to all the events are on there. Super. Anything else, Kia?
I don't think so, no. Like you say, if there's any questions or anything, call us, email us, whatever works for you. You know, that's what we're here for. Brilliant.
Thank you. Great session. Thank you for your time and for answering all those questions. I will draw our recording to a close, if I can remember how to do it. There we go.